Well, not many showbiz relationships survive, but one of the most endearing and enduring Hollywood love stories was between Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward.
For decades, Hollywood has been captivated by the legendary love story of Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman, a marriage that defied the odds in an industry notorious for fleeting romances. They were the golden couple, admired not only for their talent, but for the unwavering bond that carried them through half a century together. But behind the glamour and the smiles, their relationship was more complex than the fairy tale image Hollywood projected. Now, at 95 years old, Joanne Woodward is finally breaking her silence about Paul Newman, the man she loved, the partner she stood by, and the legend she helped shape. For years, Joanne avoided the spotlight, content to let Paul bask in the glory of his iconic career. Yet as she reflects on their life together, she reveals truths that confirm what many had long suspected, that their love was as tested as it was timeless, and that the strength of their union was built on resilience, sacrifice, and unshakable trust. The love story of Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman didn't begin with the glamour of red carpets or award shows. It started in the world of live theater, where two ambitious actors found themselves drawn together long before either became a Hollywood icon. In the early 1950s, Newman was a struggling young performer, balancing acting classes with family responsibilities, while Woodward was a rising starlet with sharp talent and even sharper wit. Their paths first crossed as understudies on Broadway, and though Newman was married at the time, the chemistry between them was undeniable. For Joanne, Paul was not the movie star the world would come to know, but simply a man who carried a quiet intensity, one that both intrigued and unsettled her. She later admitted that she found him strikingly handsome, but what truly caught her attention was his thoughtfulness. Unlike many young actors chasing fame, Newman seemed reflective, grounded, and deeply committed to honing his craft, yet their connection didn't immediately blossom into romance. Joanne was wary of Newman's circumstances. He was a married man with children, and despite her growing feelings, she refused to be a reason for a broken home. Still, their time together on stage and in rehearsals created an undeniable bond, one that neither could ignore. Over time, the friendship deepened into something more, and when Newman's first marriage came to an end, he and Joanne finally allowed themselves to embrace the relationship they had long resisted. Their union was not without controversy. Hollywood was quick to gossip, and critics questioned whether Newman and Woodward could last in an industry where affairs and divorces were commonplace. But Joanne never wavered in her faith in Paul. She saw beyond the headlines, beyond the heartthrob image, into the core of the man himself. And Paul, for his part, often confessed that Joanne transformed him. She grounded him, gave him direction, and pushed him to become a better actor and a better man. Their first film together, The Long, Hot Summer, 1958, only added fuel to the fire. Audiences couldn't ignore the sizzling chemistry between them on screen, and by the time filming wrapped, the world knew what Joanne and Paul already felt. Theirs was a love that went beyond Hollywood's shallow romances. They married soon after in Las Vegas, beginning a partnership that would last for over 50 years. But even in those early years, Joanne made sacrifices. She was a gifted actress in her own right, later winning an Academy Award for The Three Faces of Eve, yet she often stepped out of the spotlight to raise their family and support Paul's career. At the time, few understood the depth of her decision, but Joanne herself would later reveal that she never regretted it. Her fulfillment came not from chasing the limelight, but from building a life with Paul that was rooted in love, trust, and family. Looking back, it's easy to romanticize those early days as the beginning of Hollywood's perfect couple. But Joanne's later reflections remind us that even from the start, their relationship was not about perfection, it was about commitment. Their bond was tested by circumstance, judged by outsiders, but strengthened by the simple truth that they chose each other. Again and again, once the wedding vows were exchanged in 1958, Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman embarked on what would become one of Hollywood's most enduring marriages. But unlike many celebrity unions, theirs was not built on glitz or the trappings of fame. Instead, they consciously chose a quieter, more grounded path. After their honeymoon, Joanne and Paul settled in Westport, Connecticut, far from the bright lights of Los Angeles. For Joanne, this was a deliberate choice. She wanted their children to grow up with stability, not the chaos and superficiality of Hollywood. It was here that they raised their 3 daughters, Nell, Melissa, and Claire, while Paul also maintained a close relationship with the 3 children from his first marriage. Joanne dedicated herself to creating a home that felt safe, nurturing, and normal, even while married to one of the most recognizable men in the world. But life in Connecticut didn't mean Paul and Joanne escaped the challenges of balancing love, career, and family. Newman's career soared through the 1960s and 70s, with classics like Cool Hand Luke, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid, and The Sting. Joanne, meanwhile, often found herself in his shadow. She had already proven herself a formidable actress, winning an Oscar in 1957 for The 3 Faces of Eve, yet she consciously stepped back from the spotlight. Why? Because, as Joanne later explained, you can't have it all. She believed that if she and Paul both pursued their careers at full throttle, their marriage and family would inevitably suffer. So she made sacrifices. She worked selectively, choosing projects that aligned with her family's needs rather than chasing stardom. Some saw this as a waste of her immense talent, but Joanne saw it as a conscious act of love and responsibility. That's not to say the journey was free of tension. Paul's growing fame meant constant attention, relentless media scrutiny, and temptations that could have destroyed their marriage. Rumors of affairs followed him, as they did with every major Hollywood star, but Joanne refused to let gossip dictate their lives. She trusted Paul, but she also made it clear that their marriage required effort, honesty, and respect. One of the most remarkable aspects of their partnership was their balance. Paul often credited Joanne with keeping him grounded. He famously said, "I have steak at home. Why would I go out for a hamburger?" A declaration of his devotion to Joanne that silenced countless rumors. Behind closed doors, Joanne was more than just a supportive wife. She was his equal. She challenged him, motivated him, and reminded him that there was more to life than fame. Together, they also used their success to make a difference. Joanne encouraged Paul's philanthropic ventures, most notably the creation of Newman's Own, a food company whose profits were donated entirely to charity. What began with a simple salad dressing grew into a philanthropic empire that has given away hundreds of millions of dollars. Joanne often said this was one of the proudest achievements of their shared life, not the Oscars or the box office hits, but the lives they touched through giving back. Through it all, Joanne's sacrifices shaped the foundation of their marriage. She wasn't simply Paul Newman's wife. She was the steady force that allowed their family to thrive and their love to endure. And now, at 95, as she reflects on those years, Joanne makes it clear the sacrifices were worth it. Because what they built together was bigger than Hollywood. It was a legacy of love, family, and purpose. For all their love and devotion, Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman's marriage was not without struggles. To the outside world, they were Hollywood's perfect couple, an enduring romance in a town known for broken vows. But behind closed doors, their life was far more complicated. At 95, Joanne reflects candidly on those struggles, and in doing so, she paints a picture that is both human and relatable. The first challenge was Paul's growing fame. By the late 1960s, he was one of the most bankable stars in the world, his piercing blue eyes and charm making him a global icon. Everywhere he went, women adored him. Tabloids speculated endlessly about affairs, while directors and producers competed for his time. Joanne admitted that this attention wasn't easy. Even though Paul declared his loyalty to her time and again, the constant scrutiny tested her patience and trust. "It wasn't the women that bothered me," Joanne once said. It was the noise that came with them. Then there were Paul's personal demons. He openly battled alcoholism for much of his life, a struggle that Joanne quietly shouldered alongside him. While Newman never shied away from admitting his dependence on alcohol, it was Joanne who bore the emotional weight at home. She was his anchor, the one who held the family together when his drinking threatened to unravel everything. Later in life, Paul credited Joanne's steadfastness as one of the reasons he was able to eventually confront and control his addiction. Their marriage also faced the challenge of balancing two powerful personalities. Joanne wasn't just a wife. She was a woman with her own career, her own opinions, and her own ambitions. At times, the dynamic between them caused friction. Paul himself admitted he could be difficult, driven by ambition and perfectionism. Joanne, by contrast, valued balance and family above all. Their differences sometimes clashed, but those very differences also kept their relationship dynamic and honest. And then, of course, there were the rumors. Hollywood thrives on gossip, and Newman was constantly the subject of speculation. Whispers of on-set romances circulated whenever he starred alongside beautiful leading ladies. Joanne, however, chose a different approach. She refused to let the tabloids dictate her truth. Instead, she trusted Paul and focused on the life they were building together. Still, she admitted later that it wasn't always easy. Being married to one of the world's most desirable men came with moments of doubt and insecurity. What made their marriage remarkable, however, was their resilience. Unlike many couples who crumbled under the weight of fame, Joanne and Paul leaned into each other. They faced their struggles head-on rather than pretending they didn't exist. Joanne once said, "Happily ever after doesn't mean no problems. It means working through them together." Their partnership was tested repeatedly, but each test seemed to strengthen their bond rather than weaken it. Joanne's patience, Paul's devotion, and their shared values of honesty and loyalty carried them through storms that would have destroyed other marriages. Even during the hardest times, Paul often credited Joanne as his compass, the person who reminded him of what truly mattered. Now, looking back at 95, Joanne acknowledges those struggles not as failures, but as proof of their humanity. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. And perhaps that's why their love story resonates even more today, because it shows that even legends stumble. But with resilience and trust, love can endure. At 95, Joanne Woodward's voice carries the wisdom of a woman who has lived through the golden age of Hollywood. Motherhood, personal triumphs, and the immeasurable pain of loss. For decades, she chose silence, preferring to let Paul Newman's work and reputation speak for itself. But now in her twilight years, Joanne has opened up in rare interviews, offering her most candid reflections on her husband's legacy and their life together. For Joanne, Paul was never just the world's sexiest man alive or an Academy Award-winning actor. He was above all a partner, a father, and a man who tried, sometimes succeeded, sometimes failed, to live authentically. In breaking her silence, Joanne has revealed the depth of their shared journey. She describes Paul not only as a brilliant artist, but as someone who constantly wrestled with his own humanity. Fame never sat comfortably on his shoulders, and despite his effortless charisma, Paul often felt trapped by Hollywood's expectations. Joanne recalls how he found solace in philanthropy, channeling his success into Newman's Own, a brand that has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to charity. That, she says softly, was the Paul I knew, the one who gave more than he ever took. Her reflections also reveal an unshakable truth about love. She admits that marriage to a man like Newman was never simple, but it was always worth it. She calls their relationship a long conversation, one that lasted more than 50 years, filled with laughter, conflict, growth, and endless devotion. Joanne highlights how humor became their survival tool. Paul, known for his quick wit, could diffuse even the most heated arguments with a well-timed joke. To Joanne, this was proof that their connection wasn't just romantic, it was profoundly human. Perhaps the most striking part of Joanne's late-life reflections is her honesty about imperfection. She resists the temptation to idealize their life together. Instead, she emphasizes that their love was built on choosing each other again and again, even when circumstances made it difficult. It wasn't about never doubting, she admits. It was about finding your way back to each other no matter what. She also speaks to the loneliness of outliving her great love. Paul's passing in 2008 left a void that could never be filled. Joanne confesses that for years afterward, she would reach for him instinctively in the night, forgetting he was gone. Even now, she says, he is present in her daily life, in memories, in their children, and in the causes he championed. Her words are tinged with grief but also gratitude. Not everyone gets a love story like ours, she reflects. I was lucky. As Joanne breaks her silence, the world sees her not only as Paul Newman's wife, but as a remarkable woman in her own right. She was an Academy Award-winning actress, a devoted mother, and a steady force in Paul's life. Her reflections remind us that behind every Hollywood legend, there is a deeper, more intimate story, one of quiet strength, sacrifice, and love. In the end, Joanne's testimony reframes Paul Newman's legacy. Yes, he was a cinematic icon, but his truest role was as her husband, the love of her life. At 95, Joanne Woodward's words carry a bittersweet beauty. They remind us that while fame fades, love endures. And in telling her truth at last, Joanne ensures that their story will be remembered not as a fairy tale, but as something far greater, a real, lasting partnership between two extraordinary people.